Welcome to York Talks. My name is Peter Ball. I'm a Professor of Operations Management in the University of York Management School, and I'm here to present to you today about manufacturing. And I'll explain the title because you might think there's errors in the title, that those words don't go together. But that's what my talk's about. And I hope that by the end of it, you can see how we can have a different view of manufacturing. So my presentation is about clean and green manufacturing, which you might think, but manufacturing's not. I'll argue it is. And maybe manufacturing should be in our towns, which you might think, ugh, don't like that idea. But let me show you some things and see if I can change your mind. First, let's cast our minds back to last year. And you might remember Conference of the Parties, or COP26. Leaders from around the world gathered in Glasgow, and they talked about something called net zero, about stopping doing the damage. I'll go on to different language in a bit about not just doing less damage or no damage, but not just paying off the interest on our debt, but actually paying down our debt and doing something called net positive. But first, one of the presentations you might have listened to was by David Attenborough, and I'll read you a quote. "We are the greatest problem solvers to have ever existed on Earth. If working apart, we are a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely working together, we are powerful enough to save it." I want to introduce some ideas that you might not have come across before, but ideas that would affect the way you and I work and live and where we socialize. So let's look at manufacturing. And here is what I would call a delightful painting. And you might look at that painting and look at pollution of factories billowing out smoke. I look at that and think differently. I look at that and think, there's a productive space there of making really interesting and really useful objects that make our lives better, that we use every day. And then if you step back a bit, maybe look to the bottom left of this painting, and you'll see a couple relaxing with their dog and enjoying the clean air. And that's quite a contrast of the painting. And it's quite a contrast that I'd like to challenge and say, why do those two things have to be different? But that's an old view of manufacturing. And maybe I'll present, maybe a modern view. Maybe this is your modern view of manufacturing, one where you've got heavy industry bellowing out smoke and other substances, and on an environment where you wouldn't like to live. But maybe look bottom left, and you might feel sorry for the people who live bottom left in those flats, those apartments. But again, I would challenge why you can't have these two sitting side by side. Because that's not my view of manufacturing. I have a very different view, a much cleaner, greener view of manufacturing. So this is my view of how we run our factories. They are clean spaces. They are often bright spaces. I don't know whether you knew that bringing in natural light reduces absenteeism, increases productivity. But if you take the clean machine on the left that is conducting operations to make something useful for us, okay, it's not the mass employment, and this is a different debate, the mass employment of yesteryear where we use people for their muscles. Now we're using people for their brains. So this person at the center of this picture is working to improve the operation of this small area of a factory. And if you look across to the right, there's an exact representation of what's on the left. And this is what's called a twin, a digital twin. So it's something that exists in the digital world. And the person in the center is able to control that digital world to make things better, to control how the machines work, to be more productive or cleaner and greener. But so this is my view of a factory. You don't see the big extraction of air and billowing smoke on the outside. So I want to take you through a journey where we can look at things differently. And I've introduced this idea of digitalization, and that's one of the things I want to introduce to you. I've got two other things. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is maximization, making use of everything, as well as localization. And then I'll go back to the digitalization. I'll give you a little warning. You might not like some of the things I'm about to present here, or at least one of them. On maximization, if we look back decades ago, or hundreds of years, or thousands of years, we didn't used to waste things. We used to reuse things. We used to make use of everything that was available. Perhaps we've lost some of that in our everyday lives and even within manufacturing. But that's changing. And now, if I take the example of UPVC windows, if you have them removed from your house, maybe you're in an area where there's a company that makes sure they get their hands on these things because they're valuable. They've got valuable materials that they can take apart and reprocess and make into new windows, new, even better performing windows. So they see waste as an opportunity to use resource, but to make money. And that starts to transition into this net positive idea of doing better. I've got drink factory water. That was the health warning. Would you drink factory water? Would you drink water from rivers? Maybe if you go hill walking, maybe you would. But there are factories around the world. There's a place in the UK, there's a place in Vietnam, where the water quality that comes out of the industrial process is in drinking water quality. It's in better quality than the water going in. And they want to package that and sell it or give it away. So this idea that factories are dirty, horrible things has to be challenged, and they can actually be productive, value-adding, green, adding to the environment and making the environment better. So moving on from that, your stomach might still be churning. I want to talk about localization next, and this idea where you make close to the customer. We've got the idea of globalization at the moment, and you have the problems of getting product around the world at the moment. But why can't we make things close to the customer? Why can't we make things where the customer works and lives? Therefore, they could be amongst the employees, and therefore money could circulate locally. That concept exists within the UK of having the circular economy in the greatest sense, where money circulates. But if you have really close to the customer, could we have high street factories? Could we make so close to the customer that they could socialize, they could shop, and they could get the products that are made? Now, you might think that's a strange way of looking at things, but if you've got clean factories, and I'll introduce you to very small factories in a minute, then perhaps you can. And then finally, this idea of digitalization. You can go into a supermarket, you can look up a product, you can scan a barcode in certain circumstances and find out exactly which farm that product came from. So we can trace products. We've got this digital footprint, we've got this fingerprint of where this product came from. And if we can have models of factories, we can combine all that data and experiment digitally. It's a bit like we've got Xboxes at home or whatever games console, and we can exist in a virtual world for leisure, but we can also use it in industry. And this idea of digital, you might think as, well, actually we could start tailoring things exact to requirements. We have tailored dog food, we have tailored muesli, we have all sorts of things tailored for us, down to every single car. You probably didn't know this, but every single car going down a production line in a factory anywhere in the world is different. No two cars are ever the same anymore. There's millions upon millions of combinations. And we can use this digital world to specify what we want and make those products efficiently exact to customer requirements. Now, if we can make things in small factories, in clean factories, that opens up a lot of opportunities. For those of you who might be Formula One fans or even not fans, and you weren't concentrating on the race, but as the camera pans out and you see the cars going around the racetrack, what's going on in the lorry park is just as important as what's going on in the racetrack, because those lorries parked there aren't idle. They are productive mini factories making the components for the car's next race. And that ability to make in small units and provide locally is an interesting one. So if we can make locally to where the need is, and we can transport it very easily, then that opens up a lot of opportunities, because we're not worried about pollution, and we're more worried about, can we get the ideal product for us? And to give you an example of this tailoring, a personal story, a number of years ago, I went into a shop. My daughter liked a dress, didn't quite fit. So one shop staff was helping us, and then another came along and convinced us we wanted to buy this dress that didn't fit. So as I was paying for it, took a few minutes, the dress was being adjusted exact to the requirements. So by the time I finished paying, we picked up the item, we walked out with a perfectly fitting clothing item. So this idea that shops just have to be transactional places and we can't have productive operations going on, because if we think about, we can go and get photos printed, we can get all sorts of things done on the high street. And if we look around cities, then maybe there's more going on than meets the eye. For those of you who live in York, or even visited York, you might have gone to a place called Spark York, and you might have gone to the retail space that is in part downstairs, a bit upstairs. You might not have known that Professor Catherine Denby from the university is running a farm there, growing things. So these are microgreens, and things like dill and parsley are being grown in this container-sized operation and supplied to people, the members of the public, but also the restaurants downstairs. So you could be eating things that have grown just a few meters away. But you don't know it's a sort of factory, well, it's a farm, but it's a space where things are made without the chimneys, without the idea of pollution. So things can happen in miniature these days. And my interest in this is whether we can build digital models. So if I peel apart the walls of this container and look inside, then I can show you that there's a series of production stages to grow these products, where they're germinated and they're put onto growing beds, and then they're harvested and weighed and packaged. And my area is building digital models of these operations, and we can overlay onto these images a process where we model, so we can capture what's going on in the real world. We can run through, and we can do things like optimize what the customer wants, or optimize how much produce this farm produces, or even optimizes the total nutrition that comes out of this farm. So we can have things that work in the city centres, that are clean, that are doing things for us that make our lives better, can get things to us very quickly. So in this case, they're fresher. But they can challenge this idea that if we do have something productive in a town or city centre, that it's this horrible nondescript, is not part of our everyday interests, where it's a dusty, noisy environment. But perhaps we should be looking more at a vision of a space where it is productive, but it is clean, and we can make things very quickly exact to our requirements, so that not only do we use our spaces in the city centres, which actually maybe there are a lot of spaces that are empty or vacant or underutilised, and we can make them into productive spaces that produce things for our needs in a clean way, perhaps even a net positive way, that can make our lives a lot better, but can have money circulating and employ more people. So I hope I've opened up your eyes. I hope I haven't turned too many stomachs, but I hope it opened up your eyes to how we can think of the future of what our towns and cities serve as, and our relationship with how we get these products that help us lead better and healthier lives. So I thank you for your time, and I hope next time you go around a town or city centre, you look at it with fresh eyes and think what a different place it could be. So thank you very much for your time. And there's a couple of people that have material that I've used in this presentation, so I will show the credits and thank them for their time.